Hi everyone, how are you? There's a clicker. Okay. Okay, thanks for being here. I'm Shiho Watabe, CEO of Shibuya Startups KK, and I'll be your moderator for the next 45 minutes. We're gonna introduce ourselves. Welcome to the session named How AI Changes Human Lifestyles. Okay, do you wanna take it away?
Yeah, I'll get started. So I wonder if this will work. Move the slides. Yes. So a little bit about me. I'm Tiago. I came from Portugal. I've been living in Japan for 6 years, and I'm running a company here called Recursive, together with Katsutoshi Yamada, who's somewhere there in the crowds as well. And we started this company to build sustainable AI products and services. So this idea came about 3 to 4 years ago. I was talking to Toshi, and I was telling him like, hey, I'm working in an AI startup, but I'm not really feeling fulfilled. I don't feel like my work is contributing to society. And so he told me like, hey, let's make a company, let's do something that's meaningful. But of course, in the beginning, we were not really sure like, what does that even mean? How do we make sustainable AI? So we spent the first part of our company thinking about how do we actually use AI to build a fairer, more sustainable society. So that's the mission of our company. And we've identified 4 key pillars. So those are accelerate innovation, increase productivity, prepare for future risks, and deliver better work and education. So that's what we're focusing on. Those are the problems we're trying to solve. Now, we're an AI company. So we've actually developed a number of platforms that we're giving to big Japanese companies to help them modernize and move into this future of AI-first companies. So we currently have 4 products or platforms that are based on this kind of deep tech. We're focusing on generative AI. That's our Flow series. We do text generative AI and image generative AI. And I'm originally a physicist, so my passion lies with science and simulation. So we also have a scientific AI platform called Borealis and an optimization platform. And of course, this is very tech-oriented, so I'll just very briefly give you introductions of use cases that we've built with those platforms. So with FindFlow, we're trying to connect LLM to data to create intelligent agents. And this is in line with our goals to accelerate innovation and increase productivity. We're helping research departments do literature research with large language models connected to data. And we're also building education platform to help with the transition of labor. So we're going to see a lot of reskilling that's going to be necessary as we move to more and more adoption of AI. With PixelFlow, we're working with multimodal data input and output for real-world interactions. So examples of things that we've built, innovative applications. For a clinic, we've built a surgery simulator to help clients make better decisions when they're making aesthetic surgeries by visualizing it on their face. And we're also using multimodal LLMs for grading school exercises to help kids accelerate their education. With Borealis, that's my personal favorite, we're developing hybrid physics and deep learning models for environmental simulation. So the goal of Borealis is to help with this preparing for future risks and increase of productivity. So we have one product where we're using our models for estimating renewable energy production, and we have a software platform that allows you to estimate it anywhere in Japan what is the solar power that is going to come out if you put a solar farm there with very high accuracy thanks to the use of neural networks. And we've also developed a model for irrigation of forests. So we predict when the forest is going to have more or less water, given the weather patterns and the irrigation canals that are there, so that the people that are working there can find the right places to take the water there. And finally, with Zenith, we're doing optimization augmented with deep learning. So we're using the new deep learning models to unlock optimization use cases that maybe were not possible before. And 2 use cases are discovery for drug discovery. So we're helping our clients build recipes for their formulations of topical creams. And we're also helping one of our big clients to do better logistics by combining demand forecasting with route optimization. And so by 2030, we hope to help progress towards our goals using our platforms. And so this is how the 2 combine. So we want to use our platforms to accelerate innovation by creating new products and drugs, increase productivity by adding production with 0 GHG emission increases. We hope that Borealis will be used to manage large parts of the environment. And we hope to reach at least 100 million people with AI education using our FindFlow platform. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Jen Carter, and I am the Global Head of Technology at Google.org, which is Google's philanthropic arm. I've been at Google for over 15 years now, and my work is really focused on harnessing the power of AI and other advanced technologies to accelerate the impact of nonprofits and governments around the world. I think this work is really relevant at any time, but especially now as we face a climate crisis and a refugee crisis and a mental health crisis and so many other challenges of our day. I think it's even more clear and critical that the nonprofit and government and business and science and tech communities all work together to solve some of these challenges of our day, because we cannot do it alone. So I'm excited to be here with you all today and to dive into these topics about kind of how nonprofits and technologists can partner to deliver lasting impact. But before we do, I wanted to just share a little bit of background on Google.org. So Google.org is Google's philanthropic arm. Our goal is to bring the best of Google to innovative nonprofits and governments who are tackling the world's toughest challenges. And we do this in a few ways. First, by providing our grant dollars. So 1% of Google's profits go to support nonprofits around the world. Last year, we gave away around $400 million US to nonprofits. And this was part of a 5-year, $1 billion commitment. We also give back by providing our products and technology. So for example, installing Wi-Fi immediately after a crisis or providing cloud credits to nonprofits who need them. Over the past 5 years or so, we've given away over $7 billion US in our in-kind product donations. So these are things like ad grants or cloud credits, Google Workspace, things like that. And then finally, we give back by providing what we think is our most valuable resource, which is our people. Over the past 5 years, we've done over 400,000 hours of pro bono work with nonprofits and governments around the world. That's the equivalent of 200 work years, so a pretty big commitment. But how do we actually do that? So it's looked a little bit different over time. But we were consistently hearing from the nonprofits and governments we were working with that they wanted to do more with technology, but it was really difficult for them to find and retain the software engineers and product managers and UXers and everyone else that companies like Google rely on to build great products. And at the same time, we were actually hearing from our employees, we call them Googlers, but we were hearing that they wanted to do more to give back to the communities where they lived and worked, but it was really difficult for them to find these opportunities to make use of their unique skill sets. And so we created this program, the Google.org Fellowship, that enables teams of high-performing Googlers to work full-time for 6 months with a nonprofit or government, typically building a product from the ground up. So that's a little bit sort of about our approach, providing grants plus in-kind product donations plus Googlers. And then finally, just want to share a little bit about our issue areas where we focus. So as many folks may be familiar, back in 2015, the UN launched a set of Sustainable Development Goals, which was sort of a roadmap for a greener, better future by 2030. And we try to align our work behind this and help contribute to those goals. So that's just a super high-level overview, but again, excited to dig in as we go, and I will pause there.
So this is me. Hi again, I'm Shiho Watabe. I'm the CEO of a company called Shibuya Startups KK. Shibuya Startups KK is created by the mayor of Shibuya together with 3 iconic Shibuya city-based companies, Tokyo Land, Tokyo, and GMO Internet. And we support global founders coming into Japan and thriving in Japan. So here's a list of services that we provide. If you need visa support, we're there, and we help foreign entrepreneurs coming to Japan and set up bank accounts. And we have free co-working space for 1 year. And we have legal and accounting support in English and other growth support that you will need coming into Japan. And we have some focus areas, and these are the areas that Japan is really unique in, and we hope to have global founders coming and innovate in these areas. And those areas include aging of society / shrinking population, and fandom economy. We're known for anime, VTuber, esports, all kinds of IPs. And other areas would be natural disasters, disaster tech, inbound tourism, food culture, and anything that is unique to the city. And eligibility-wise, we welcome any founders from around the world who want to innovate and see potential in the Japanese market. So there's not much of a criteria at this moment. We just started last September, and we're looking forward to receiving more applications from founders. Yeah, that's it for me. So with that, we're going to move on to the questions for Jen and Tiago. So the first question is about the power of AI. For Jen, what does Google.org sees, how does Google.org sees the power of AI in philanthropies?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I mentioned the sort of the sustainable development goals that really orient a lot of our work, but I think within that there's sort of no shortage of problems that we could work on, and so we try to focus on those areas where we think Google and Googlers can uniquely add value. So for us, that's often projects that involve, AI or other advanced technologies. But maybe another orienting factor to our work is around the role that philanthropy can and should play. So if you think about, philanthropy is kind of uniquely situated to take risky bets and longer term bets. If you compare that to sort of other funding sources. So for example, governments often, they're accountable to taxpayers and they generally have to only do proven approaches to challenges, or private investors who maybe are more focused on short-term investments and they want to see a return, a financial return on their work. And so we think philanthropy can play a really unique role in helping catalyze the sector, trying out new approaches that maybe are unproven. And once we prove that they work, then we can sort of work with nonprofits and governments to implement them more broadly. So that's one of the sort of unifying principles, and we think it works really well for Google, because Google is sort of known for taking these big bets. We call them moonshots, but we're, from the start, we've sort of always tried to take risks. It's okay if something fails as long as it fails quickly, but ideally, the things that do succeed, we can then sort of help the sector implement as a whole. So that's kind of one of the philosophies, and we think that AI is one of those big bets. Just to come back to that question, we think it's one of the big bets, and we want to demonstrate the ways in which AI can be useful and have a positive impact in order to kind of accelerate progress.
How about you, Tiago? Why do you think AI is the best way for what you're trying to do?
Yeah, so we've focused on AI, of course, because of my background as an AI engineer, but genuinely, as thinking about the big picture, we've seen that over the last 2,000 years, the biggest driver of human progress and wealth has been innovation, right? And at this stage where we are, we believe that AI is going to be that next step in innovation. So by applying this AI technology, so like any technology, there will be positives and negatives, of course, but we do believe that we really need to leverage those positives, right? And if nobody is pushing for those positives, then only the negatives will take over. So we hope to be that force. There are many companies, of course, working on this, but within Japan, we feel like we want to be the ones that accelerate private enterprise to adopt AI, because that is one thing where I felt is a problem that we need to fix in Japan. So you have these two arms, right? So you have the research side, and then you have the productization side. And on the productization side, for AI, so far we've relied too much on startups, right? And there's the power of startups. Of course, we can make new products, new services. It's really cool. But I also think there is the power of the large corporation, right? And Japan is the place of the large corporation, but they're very slow in adopting AI. So I think to help them be more efficient, to help them reskill their labor, we really need to engage with those large Japanese players and help them modernize and adopt AI in their workflow. So that's the approach that I want to take to increase sustainability here in Japan with AI.
Thank you for sharing. I feel like AI is not too useful when it's stuck in the lab in Silicon Valley. So I'm really happy to see you guys taking the approaches that you're taking. So the second question is about the current application of AI by your organizations. So Tiago, tell me more about the current application of AI.
So what we're seeing now, the current demand is about integrating data sources, right? So As I've said before, at Recursive, we're working a lot with the big Japanese companies. And the big difficulty they're having is how to integrate data. And what we found is that by having these disparate operations, their operations can be very inefficient. So that means there's a lot of waste. I mean, the obvious one is wasting paper, right? But this is the low stakes. But what about the CO2 that we're wasting? What about the human capital that we're wasting? And what about the equality of labor, right? So the opportunities for reskilling are very unevenly distributed. So I see that as right now what we can do is to really bring that technology to help them be more efficient, integrate their data streams, make better decisions, and especially to help reskill their labor by giving them access to that data, right? So with the LLMs, we've unlocked this huge potential of getting unstructured data that before required a very difficult process of going through, collecting the data, need human annotators, right? Now we can just plug all of that in, get the LLM to extract the data, and then build those applications on top. So I see in the next 2 to 3 years, that's where we're really going to make progress, at least with our clients, is in making them more efficient and making them really helping their labor to be more innovative and reskilling to this new age.
Thank you. How about you, Jen? What is the current application of AI in Google.org?
Yeah, so overall, the organizations that we've supported in using AI report actually that they are able to achieve their primary result, their primary goal in 1/3 of the time and at half of the cost. So really exciting metric there. You know, we've been doing this work for about 5 years, and overall, the organizations are reporting, again, I think, you know, 1/3 of the time and at half the cost, which is just really huge for helping nonprofits deliver on their core goals. But just to share kind of some specific examples of what that looks like in practice, we do a lot of work in the crisis response space. And for example, we worked with an organization, Give Directly, that is using AI to automatically detect building damage from aerial imagery. So using computer vision to understand what buildings are damaged to help them more efficiently and effectively target aid. We also do a lot of work in the sort of education and workforce development space. And we're working with an organization there, Career Village, that is actually using generative AI to serve as kind of a career coach. So it helps folks draft resumes or cover letters. It helps do mock interviews and things like that. So all sorts of roles as a career coach. We're working with an organization in the mental health space. It's actually using generative AI to train people to have difficult conversations about mental health. So this is a really interesting application that we've seen can scale a lot, but essentially we worked with an organization to develop a training, sort of a conventional classroom training about how to spot warning signs. You know, we're in a global mental health pandemic, and one survey showed that over 90% of people want to be able to support a friend or a peer who's in crisis, but only 25% feel like they're equipped to have those difficult conversations. And so we worked with this organization, developed, again, sort of a conventional classroom training that helps them detect warning signs. But then after that, it's a Gen AI chatbot that simulates the friend in crisis side of the conversation so that they can actually practice applying what they learned. So they, you know, play themselves and practice sharing, you know, what they learned, teaching empathy and things like that. And then the chatbot simulates their friends so they can really practice those conversations. What I really like about this example is we often think about AI as maybe helping with efficiency or automation and kind of best case scenario keeping quality the same, but really just being about, you know, improving the speed with which you can do things. But this was a cool case where we actually saw the quality of the training improve. There's a really big gap between learning in a classroom setting what you should say in those situations and actually feeling sort of mentally prepared to have those really difficult conversations. And this chatbot helps bridge that gap. Importantly, it's never interacting directly with the person in crisis, right? It's only helping someone who wants to have that conversation, who wants to spot warning signs. But it ended up really improving the quality. They can practice whenever they want, as often as they want, and it really helps people feel prepared in the event that they do have to have one of those conversations. So that's just one more example. But again, you can kind of see across issue areas, we're just seeing so much power and potential of generative AI and AI more broadly. And again, overall, it's hard to compare impact across sectors, but organizations are achieving their results in 1/3 of the time and at half the costs.
Wow, those real examples are really inspiring to hear. So what about the challenges? It sounds great, but do you come across any challenge in implementing AI in those things? Whoever that, Jen, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. We actually recently conducted a survey of nonprofits and found, I think it was 77% of nonprofits thought they should be using AI, but only 22% of them actually were. And so there's this really big gap. And so that was one thing we wanted to know in this survey. But the second thing was exactly that question. What are the barriers that they're facing and how can we help them overcome those? And we noticed really two big trends in the survey. So the first was that one of the barriers they were facing was around even just envisioning how AI might be helpful to them. You know, lots of nonprofits and governments have heard that, you know, everyone should be using AI or maybe not, but they've heard there's a lot of power and potential, but they're not really sure how it might apply to them. So that's the first challenge that we heard. And then the second challenge that kind of came across pretty broadly was around, even if we have an idea, we don't think we have the right people or skill sets to implement it. And so that was the second main challenge that we heard. And so we're really doing a lot of work to kind of solve for both of those challenges. I think in the first case, that's actually why we share a lot of these case studies and proof points to kind of demonstrate what is possible. You know, whether you're using computer vision in the disaster, you know, crisis response scenario that I described, or you're using, you know, natural language processing and Gen AI in the mental health situation that I described. You know, helping share and surface these examples of creating a domain-grounded chatbot can help nonprofits get an idea about how it might be useful for them. So that's kind of what we're doing a little bit in the first case is trying to create these case studies, these proof points for how AI can be useful to help nonprofits and governments imagine how they might use it themselves. And then in the second case, to kind of help develop the skill sets and the capabilities internally, we do a lot of work around skilling and training related to this. So we've been trying to put out different content and modules that are sort of targeted to different audiences. You know, if it's just a very generic training, it can, again, feel hard to kind of apply it to your work. But as just one example, we recently launched a training in Japan. I think it was called Gemini Academy, but it was geared specifically to educators. And the idea was, you know, first it's just going to explain what is AI, what is generative AI, what is Gemini, you know, just sort of the basic concepts. But then it's going to share really targeted examples for how it might be useful to them in their day-to-day lives. So for example, again, this is for educators, this particular training. It shares sample prompts for maybe how they might use Gen AI to create a lesson plan, or how they might use it to send an email about a school event that's going to be happening, or maybe how they can use it to just summarize a large body of text to understand the main points that it's trying to say. So, you know, it provides these really targeted examples. So it's not just, it starts with a somewhat more generic training to help understand, you know, some of the core concepts, but then it's really targeted to the specific audience. And so we're trying to do a lot of that to help with the sort of capacity building and capability to develop these things in-house.
So for Jen, I was looking at the google.org website, and you obviously work with a lot of nonprofits. That's great. Do you feel like the quality of data that they have is good enough to work with your team? And in that case, how do you support them designing their projects?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say yes and no. I think data quality is an issue across the board, right? Not necessarily unique to nonprofits, but it does, you know, it is often foundational to making this work. Again, just I try to give sort of practical examples. So if we just go back to that mental health example, it's using a large language model that, you know, has already been pre-trained. But then you need to fine tune it on your specific data set. So maybe you're serving a specific population in a specific region and they use certain language when they're talking about mental health issues, and you need to fine tune it. And to do that, you do need really good training data. The flip side of that, though, is we're actually seeing that Gen AI can be useful in generating that training data. So it used to be that you would sort of have to do it manually, or you would have to have real life examples. And it's even possible now to use Gen AI to generate some of the training data, which has been really helpful. So yeah, without a doubt, it's one of the challenges that are faced. And you know, I think good data is helpful across the board. We often work with nonprofits that come to us and they're like, okay, we want to use AI to solve this problem. And our response is, you know, AI is not always the answer. Maybe some really simple data heuristics can do the trick for a lot less cost, a lot less maintenance, a lot less of all of this. But So whether you're using basically AI or not, I think encourage sort of some of those good data practices and you know, getting some of that training data and labeling it is going to be helpful across the board.
That would be really helpful. Yeah, thank you. So the same question back to you, Tiago. What's the biggest barrier or challenge in your business?
So for us, as we're taking the more private track, so we're working with these large Japanese corporates, our goal is to go into that private enterprise. And so how do we get the decision makers to really adopt AI, right? Because as you said, Jen, right, there's clear benefit in terms of speed, operating cost, and so on. So the ROI is there and the sustainability case is there. So why aren't we moving forward? And my experience has been that, at least for the Japanese culture, but even to some extent for the business culture worldwide as well, is there is some kind of risk aversion, right? So you don't want to jump into something that then turns out to be a mistake, or it turns out that there was a better technology that replaced it and now I already invested in this thing, right? So maybe there's a lot of reluctance where business leaders think they want to see where the dust settles, like what is going to be the LLM that everyone's going to use, right? But the problem is that in the AI world, the dust will never settle. There will always be, next year a new model will come out, some new way of doing things will come out, and so on. And if you're just waiting for that culmination point where everything is settled, then your competitors will already have caught up to you and will have implemented all these things and outcompeted you, right? So I think that that's a bit of the challenge, is to change that mindset that used to be very waterfall based. So in terms of software development, we call waterfall when you plan things out in advance. So I want to do something 2 years from now, I'm going to start now and I'm going to plan, like tomorrow I'm going to do this, next week I'm going to do this, and so on and so forth. But nowadays we need to use this agile development, which is we embrace that, you know, every 3 months, every 6 months, there's going to be a new technology that maybe changes the way we're going to do it. But we can plan for that. We can build a structure, and part of it is going to be investing on data. Part of it is going to be investing on people and training them for that educational mindset, so that you have this foundation of an organization that can quickly adapt and evolve when the technology comes, so that it's fine, right? Like we developed this one AI technology, and now it turns out there's a better thing that can replace it, then we replace it instead of being sad or being stuck with this old thing. But of course, this is a very tough transition for businesses because they are used to having processes that are set in stone for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And so, yeah, I see that as the biggest challenge, is how do we educate decision makers to think in these terms of like system design, agile thinking, and so on, because that's really what's going to enable them to really move forward with the times and be able to catch up with this evolving landscape of AI. And yeah, at the end of the day, like I think we were both talking about it, people are a bit afraid that AI is going to come in and automate everything, but I actually see, since the topic of this session is changing human lifestyles, I actually really see that AI is going to mix in, and we're going to see a lot of AI in the loop systems, right? So the future of sustainability in society with AI is really going to be educating people better, with higher quality, with bigger breadth and depth, so that they can adapt to this new environment, because we will have a transformation. It will be tough, right? So we've had industrial revolution before, it was tough at the time. We've had already IT revolution maybe a few decades ago. That's tough for some professions, and there will be a transition, and the only way we can cope with it is by adopting this collaboration with AI and constant reskilling, agile mindset.
I see. So what would you say is the best way to be educated for your clients and people in big companies who will be your clients in the future? What's the best way to learn?
Yeah, so we're trying to develop those AI solutions where really the AI can help you move along, right? But actually, I would say the obstacle comes even before that, which is the mindset, right? So I think at some point, if your mindset is to treat it with suspicion, like this is going to replace me, this is going to change the old way of doing things, and you're not even willing to engage with it, it's very difficult, right? So in my mind, the first step is getting people to engage with it. Like, let's play with it, let's make it fun. And that's why actually it's really good that we can develop these systems with LLMs, because in the beginning, even if you're suspicious, but you just type like, oh, hello, and the system says, hello, how are you going? It's not really attacking you, it's not trying to replace you, you can chat with it, right? And I think these interactive experiences are going to be very important to warm people up and then start to crack through this mindset of, oh, maybe this isn't so bad. Maybe this isn't a robot that's going to come here to replace me, but it's something that can work with me. And even myself personally, I find that I enjoy work more when I can interact with AI, because I can give it the boring parts of work, but I can take the interesting parts of work myself, and the AI never complains, which is great.
I see. I think for a lot of companies who want to deploy AI solutions, implement AI solutions, they feel like they need to be educated. They don't have the resources to be able to utilize your service. So that's why where the question came. That's where the question came from. So the next one is for the future of AI. For Tiago, what does a sustainable society look like in 10 years for you?
So yeah, I think I already touched a bit, but I feel like the part of it is really going to have to be how humans interact with AI and how we build those systems so that things really work well, where the AI is not solely automating everything, but we're really collaborating it with, we're setting goals, we're figuring out, I always say that the humans are really good at finding problems, right? So if there's no problems, we create new ones. And if there's something that AI is good at, is solving those problems, right? So we will always need that kind of out-of-the-box thinking of a human being like, what am I going to ask AI to do, right? And what are the good user interfaces that humans can actually interact with that AI properly in a way that's understandable, that's controllable, and that doesn't feel like it's out of our power. But I think if we are able to achieve that, if we can build that kind of good interaction with humans, then I'm seeing several areas, and those are the areas that Recursive is investing in, where we can improve sustainability in our society. So right now, of course, as you know, we're doing the fossil fuel transition, and we really need to decarbonize our society. And part of it is going to be optimizing our systems. So it's not just about transitioning to renewals, but how do we make our current systems more efficient? For example, heating, insulation, industrial manufacturing, all of these things can be done with less wastage. So we need less energy, or we can optimize when we're doing it so that we can hit the peak wind, peak solar energy, and so on and so forth. So all of these things can be optimized with AI systems that we need to develop, but they're not magical, wonderful tools, right? We need to guide them correctly. We need to build in scientific knowledge. We need to build in domain knowledge. And that's where the humans really come in. So yeah, I see the future as the synergy of collaboration between humans and AI systems that can really optimize our society and overcome some of the challenges that we're seeing right now.
How about you, Jen?
Yeah, I think there's maybe two main things that I hope for and see within the next 10 years. I think first, actually, Tiago was touching on a bit, but is around these sort of productivity improvements. And I mentioned it too in the teacher educator example, but even if nonprofits or governments are not implementing their own AI solutions, they're going to be benefiting from all of the other AI tools that exist out there and that can help from a productivity perspective. So, you know, nonprofits can get help writing a grant application or get help writing a fundraising email. They don't need to, again, have all of this knowledge about how to create their own model from scratch. They just need to get a little bit of sort of skilling around how to interact with some of these user-facing tools and, you know, get some ideas about prompts that might be useful for them in their daily lives. And so I think that's one of the big shifts that we're going to see, is just that great collaboration between, you know, humans and computers, and helping automate some of the tasks that were a little bit more manual, and just speeding up the process for folks from a pure kind of productivity perspective to help nonprofits achieve their goals even more quickly. So I think that's the first, is just around like productivity, especially using third-party tools. And then I think the second is more nonprofits and governments implementing these more programmatic applications, these native, you know, custom applications of AI that, you know, I talked about a crisis example and a mental health example, and, you know, all of these other examples that we've seen. I think more and more nonprofits over the next 10 years will get comfortable with using AI for those sorts of applications and are going to implement them, and hopefully those results that we've seen with the smaller set of organizations that we've worked with, achieving their results in a third of the time and at half the cost, you can just imagine the kind of impact that will have throughout the entire sector if all nonprofits and governments are able to make use of AI in that way. So I think that's maybe the other hope for 10 years from now. I think I referenced the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals at the beginning, and it's a plan for a greener, better future by 2030. And we've just passed the halfway mark, and I think the global community has made really great progress, and the COVID-19 pandemic set us back a bit, and so we're lagging actually on those goals. There's still a long way to go, and so the hope is that by accelerating progress, by using AI to accelerate progress, whether that's productivity or sort of more programmatic applications, that we'll actually be able to accelerate some of that progress, make up some of those losses, and achieve a lot of the 2030 goals, or since I think you said 10 years, we have till 2034 per this question, but I think hopefully it'll help us get there a little bit faster.
Thank you. To me, I'm not sure if it takes 10 years, but the word AI should just disappear and we get to live the lives that we want to live, and that's kind of the ideal future. So especially doing my job, right? I see a lot of applications from all around the world want to do something with AI in these verticals, whether it's natural disaster or founding economy, aging of the society. I think that topic itself is really important. That's something that only humans, we can own the problems and the assessing if the solution is good enough or not. So I feel like whenever I hear a startup that says we're AI startup, I kind of like get really confused, because what are you solving for whom? And that's the only thing that matters really to us. But anyhow, we have 7 more minutes. I want to open up for questions, audience questions. Is there any question from the room?
And maybe while people are thinking about a question, maybe I just want to add one point that I think is also critical for increasing sustainability, and touches on what you said, right? So if we want to create that society where we're empowering people, and at the end of the day AI almost disappears, it's just a tool we're using to solve problems. I think one key part of that is making sure that AI is accessible to all and is not controlled by a few small corporations. And so I think we're seeing a lot of discourse on the pros and cons of open source AI, but I feel like we're, at least at Recursive, we're strongly in favor of making AI open source and available to all, because that's going to empower people to solve each problem, right? We have a lot of discussion right now, oh, AI is too opinionated on this or too opinionated on that. The right solution is to let each community, and it can be even very small communities. I can imagine, like, I don't know, Okinawa or something, developing their own AI model that tailors their community specifically. And that can only happen if we have a robust ecosystem. So maybe this is a bit more technical, but we have things like Linux, open source databases, and so on. And I really hope that AI will become a critical part of that infrastructure, so that we can all build diverse applications. And I think that's also a key part to sustainability.
Yeah, I think accessibility is a huge thing. When OpenAI had this like a Sora launch, everyone was like, that looks great. And I used to do marketing, used to make a lot of videos like that. But then again, that looks really expensive and not attainable to us, general public yet. So I think sustainability-wise, also the cost of training AI models, I think that's kind of like the huge elephant in the room as well. So I think there's a lot of interest and a lot of challenges, and we kind of need to sort of keep on believing and bridge the gap. Yeah. No questions? No feedback? Oh, some hands. I think there's a person going around with the microphone.
Yeah, I have a question to Jen Carter, because everyone is talking about AI and good things, and to me, I flew from South Korea to Japan to attend, but my timeline recently, this week, has been in San Francisco because of Google I/O and OpenAI. But as you know, that the AI consumes a lot of electricity, and according to the data by International Energy Agency, they say that total data center consumes about 384 trillion watts per hour, and that's the consumption is over the electricity consumption over the United Kingdom, for example. And in that case, I wanted to ask you, from Google perspective, how are you reacting on the electricity consumption? And also, as you know, that we have the common goal to neutralize the carbon. So in that sense, I wanted to hear your perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great question. A couple of thoughts. I think first, AI is too important not to regulate and to regulate well, and a lot of that is around sort of responsible AI best practices, but I do think there's a sustainability component that comes into play there too. I think that also goes into some of the sort of pros and cons that Tiago mentioned, but yes, absolutely. One of the biggest risks of AI is the sort of cost, especially as an organization, Google.org, that is so focused on tackling, climate change and focusing on sustainability, and these models do have a large cost there. And so one of the things, again, that we think about is when is AI the right answer and a helpful tool, and when is it not? When does it cause more harm than good? And we set out these sort of set of responsible AI principles to help us understand what that is. And one of those might be using it when you could do something much more cheaply, again, using simple data heuristics to do what you want to do. Another example, though, might be, large language models have the potential to leak some of their training data, and so depending on what you're training on, that can be really sensitive. And so we have these AI principles that we've set out to kind of help guide our use, and that is absolutely a huge factor that we're aware of and thinking about how to reduce costs there of data centers and all of these other sorts of components that factor in. I think it's a great point, and we're very aware of kind of the sustainability costs, and so I think that's always a factor that comes into play when thinking about whether to use AI or to use a different approach.
I saw some other hands.
ありがとうございました。教育スタートアップの創造の告げと申します。はい。英語で。I'm sorry. So thank you very much. So I can speak English very well. So I have a question. What kind of study for our children, for our high school students? So for in the future, AI future. For example, so Diego said that. I'm sorry. So you said importance of prompt and the user interface. So yeah, but I want to know how study what kind of study needs for students.
Sure. I guess I can take that, and especially as a physicist. So I can tell you that when I was studying, physicists are famous for not liking to memorize things. And I think that's actually one of the things where that should go throughout the educational system is we need to move beyond the high achievement in education is by knowing a lot of facts. Because as we transition to AI will know all the facts, right? So it's kind of like having the calculator, right? When we started having the calculator, we don't really need to know how to do the algebra anymore, but we need to know what algebra should we do, right? So it's not about knowing the facts, knowing all of those things, but it's about asking the right questions. It's about thinking critically, is this the right approach or should I change it into a different approach? And so I think like that kind of education that is more explorative that we're seeing in some other countries, I think it's still not very widely adopted in Japan, but letting the kids figure out what are they interested in, letting them use their curiosity, giving them a problem and then just not giving them a solution, being like, hey, figure it out, and letting them fail. This is super important. So letting people fail encourages that critical thinking. And so with that kind of mindset, then you can really bounce your ideas off of these AI assistants and you can build something together with them. I don't know if you have something else to add.
No, I mean, completely agree with all of that. I think a couple of other thoughts is sort of related to the calculator. You can, maybe punch in the numbers wrong. And so it's important that you understand the math that's behind it so that you can kind of verify it. And we're seeing that again here, models can hallucinate and that will get better and change over time. But having those critical thinking skills to be able to understand when maybe the response you're seeing is not right, or maybe, the content that you're seeing is a little bit off. I think those critical thinking skills are going to be key. And then the only other thing that it made me think of was I grew up when we were deciding between various search engines, and you were switching between Google was not around at the time, so it was Lycos and Ask Jeeves and Yahoo and all of these other search engines. And the kids who did the best were the ones who understood how to enter their search query, because again, at the time, you couldn't use natural language to get your results. You had to use a very specific format in order to optimize the results that you saw. And we're seeing that all over again, basically, in terms of prompt engineering. And so it's going to be about learning how to interact with the tools that exist, whether it's the calculator back then or the LLMs, the chatbots that kind of exist now and provide those nice user interfaces. There's still so much you can do to get better answers depending on how you phrase the questions.
Yeah, to add on to that, so I think you talked about high school students. With the advance of AI, I think it's really important for children or adults to work with other people and knowing what kind of rules should be in place so that you can tell AI to go solve the problem. Maybe all the rules need to be set by people and then teach it to AI, and at the end of the day, all we have to do is to work with other people. That's what came to my mind. We're running out of time, but maybe we can squeeze in one more question. Go ahead. I think we're 2 minutes over. Let's.
What are your thoughts on the job displacements that will take place because of AI? And I know you touched upon using open source to find the field and making it available to everyone. But also around wealth distribution, AI will generally be held by corporations and stuff. So just how do we the topic is about AI changing human lives. How do we transition smoothly with, for example, there's cognitive labor, creative labor, physical labor. How do we make sure people can smoothly make a living in this new world?
So maybe we should repeat the question because there was no microphone, but the question was about how AI will affect wealth distribution overall and whether there's any concerns about large corporations controlling it. So yeah, as I said, the recursive AI stance is that we believe AI should be this infrastructure that permeates throughout society. So it's very dangerous to have it controlled by a single organization or group of organizations, and there definitely needs to be more efforts into sharing that infrastructure with the world so that it can be customized and its benefits can be shared throughout society. So I think that's something we're going to have to work on a bit more. But having said that, at the same time, I also believe it's one of those effects where the technology will raise the floor, right? So even though there might still be inequality, but everyone is going to see some benefits to the adoption of AI at the end of the day.
Yeah, I would agree. I think one of the other sort of risks or challenges with AI is that a lot of the data, for example, that these LLMs are trained off of is not necessarily representative. And so I think that's one of the roles of philanthropy. We launched, it's called the Lacuna Fund, and the goal is to kind of help make sure that the data is representative. So we're creating data sets and generating data from low and middle income countries that maybe weren't represented. And so I think it's absolutely right. There's a big risk of sort of widening the digital divide, and I think the role of philanthropy and the role of government and the role of others is to help ensure that AI is made available and accessible to everyone so that it doesn't sort of increase the disparity and actually works to kind of close some of those gaps. But skilling and training is going to be another huge part of it. The jobs of the future are going to look a little bit different, but that has been the case. I think you talked about the various, evolution over time, but that has been the case throughout time, and it's about making sure that we're providing the skilling and the training to help folks move along there, and the jobs of the future we might not be able to imagine. I think the classic example we always use is no one knew a flight attendant would exist until planes were not a thing, and so there's just all these jobs that we maybe can't even envision now that will kind of exist in the future.
With that, we're 5 minutes over, so we're gonna have to wrap up, but thank you to the speakers and audience for participating. Have a great night.